All right, today's topics, we are going to cover governance, risk, and compliance. That's the GRC portion. We're going to define those, talk about a little bit about them, how they pertain to what we're discussing today, and then how GRC pertains to your system and your company. We'll talk about ALLOut Security, which is the security tool set that can greatly enhance and improve your GRC combating. Segregation of Duties, which is one of the components of GRC and one of the specialties of ALLOut Security. Mitigating controls, which have to do with segregation of duties. And then a few other things that ALLOut offers, which are easy and very effective ways to combat GRC. So we'll look at preventative SOD, a little bit of access reporting, and critical process lists for reporting purposes as well. Go ahead, bro. All right, starting out with governance. There are many definitions and many forms of governance. From the high-level standpoint, corporate governance, it consists of a set of processes, customs, policies, laws, and institutions affecting the way people direct, administer, and control a corporation. More geared towards us, we're in the IT governance, information technology governance, and as you can see here, primarily deals with the connections between business focus and IT management. The goal of clear governance is to assure that investment in IT generates business value and mitigates the risks that are associated with IT projects. So what does that mean? Basically just means the everyday management of your JDE system and how that flows. Who can do what within your system and access what? Are we monitoring that? Is my system locked down or is and therefore free from risk? What are those risks? And then basically it's the processes and procedures that the company has in place to ensure that there's minimal and or no risk, and if there are risks, that they are controlled. Go ahead. Moving on to risk management. Again, the identification, evaluation, and prioritization of risk, followed by coordinated and economical application of resources to minimize, monitor, and control the probability or impact of unfortunate events to maximize the realization of opportunities. I know that's a lot of robust there, but there are some key main points. The minimize, obviously, is what we want. We want to minimize our risk. We certainly want to monitor our risk, and then if there are risks that inevitably are within an ERP system, we want to be able to control those risks. So again, what are we doing to manage and maintain access issues to ensure that our business is not at risk? What process do we have, and how are we controlling those? And we want to make sure what you're thinking, what losses, what type of issues could we be faced with, and we might talk about it here in a minute. But the main thing is financial and or loss of goods, depending on the company structure. Most people think it has to do with everything with money, and I would say 9 times out of 10, fraud for the most part does, whether it's an inventory standpoint or not, the company is losing money. But the loss of goods, to me, kind of has more of a physical touch, more than the behind the scenes bottom line touch. So there are many forms of risk out there, and it needs to be monitored from a very holistic standpoint and a high level standpoint. Go ahead. And lastly, the C portion of our GRC is compliance. So simple base form is conforming to a rule such as a specification, policy, standard, or law. In ERP systems, we are typically dealing with the regulatory compliance. It describes the goal that organizations aspire to achieve in their efforts to ensure that they are aware of and take steps to comply with relevant laws, policies, and regulations. So the compliance portion comes in with auditors. Whether you're private or publicly held, you have audit requirements, or you have internal business requirements if you're private and don't have to report. So there are different types of regulatory compliance standards that aren't necessarily industry-wide, depending on the business. Go ahead, Bert. All right, what does GRC, or how does GRC pertain to my system? Does it pertain to my system and my company? The two distinguishing factors that I kind of just touched on a little bit are the private and publicly traded. Publicly traded, you're mandated audits. You have pretty clear-cut audit requirements that'll come from your audit company, someone from an external auditor of like a KPMG, in any of those types of companies. Private companies, while in my opinion, yes, GRC, it should pertain to any company, no matter their stature, because you want to protect your company. But publicly traded are a bit more on the heavy side of this. What does it mean for GRC? What does GRC mean to my JDE system, and how does GRC apply to my system? And again, it depends on the company structure. But like I just mentioned, one thing is certain: it should apply to all companies. All right. Yeah. Okay. I'm good with that one, Brooke. I thought I saw it changing, so there we go. All right. What is ALLOut Security? Now we're going to get into, as I mentioned earlier on our topics, the tool that helps you manage and maintain and control the GRC issues that the ERP JD Edwards world faces. So in the base description right off the ALLOut website, and I would have to agree with this, is ALLOut is the most powerful set of risk, security, audit, and compliance tools specifically for JD Edwards market. We work hand in hand with ALLOut. We have worked with other third parties as well. They all have their great points, their emphasis on what they can do, but from my standpoint, ALLOut has the full package. Originally, it was developed just to combat the issues that JD Edwards were using back in the early 2000s when SOX, Sarbanes-Oxley, came out. And it was originally designed just for SOX reporting. It did not have any of the other components, as you see down here, where it eventually expanded to HC&C abilities, application leads. Auditors can get in and do things, and then more specifically and more importantly in my eyes is it allows for full management of your security in JD Edwards. So it is a great tool for your security officers, IT team, whatever the folks are that takes care of that portion of your system. All right. So again, continuing with ALLOut Security, there are 6 modules, if you will, of AOS. All can be purchased separately. That's why they have broken them out. And they're pretty self-explanatory, as you see here on the left. The 2 highlighted are the ones we're going to go over today, because those are the ones that directly pertain to risks and GRC related issues. But combi roles, that is a neat feature that that AOS built in that allows you to take on issues where you have role sequencing, too many roles assigned to the user. You know, users can are only supported from the Oracle standpoint 30 roles per user. Well, in some cases, some systems, users have over 30, and we have seen users experience very strange access issues despite what the security records say assigned to their user ID. And then Security Plus, Menu Plus, and Profile Plus. So security obviously is just maintaining your security. It's access to the security workbench and everything in and around that. Menu Plus, the same thing. You're able to manage your menus in a much neater grid format, all in one, versus having to do it in Solution Explorer or regular JDE. And then Profile Plus gives you any and everything around basically the 92 and the 98 OWSEC, which is your users and your roles. Something to note on the last bullet point here is, in order to maintain or control GRC related issues, you must have the risk management and risk reporting modules of AOS. You could potentially do it with just Security Plus, but you wouldn't have the reports to run. But having that would at least give you the data in a better view that you could maybe manipulate the data manually. But again, from an AOS standpoint, to manage this using the AOS tool, you would need the 2 highlighted modules. All right, Brooke. All right, getting into our next portion here, Segregation of Duties, or SOD. It is a basic building block of sustainable risk management and internal controls for a business. I'll let you read the rest of that, but in a short sense, it is basically taking every process that a business does, lining those out, and separating them from your roles. So if you have job-based roles, they may have multitudes of access where that are technically different processes, or maybe multiple parts of a process, but yet still should be segregated because those can cause a risk, as what we're talking about. So Without AOS, it can be managed. I have seen it done. I've seen it done one time so far in my tenure here, and they had it down to a pretty good science. However, it was a very robust macro-enabled Excel sheet, or I should say sheets, that they used to dump data to run VLOOKUPs, countifs. So it was a magnitude of manual work that was needed to be done. And the reason that I actually went on site to do a security assessment is because the auditors were a bit leery of their manual GRC risk, initiative within the company, and were wanting to see it more of an automated process. So, auditors can be interesting, and they have their list of demands. So it doesn't always mean that what you have built in-house could suffice. So something to think about. And as you can see here, down at the bottom of the little graph, it's person A can write the PO, person B can approve the PO, person C should approve the invoice or enter the invoice, and then the last person, D, can sign the check. You could have, technically, you could have everybody doing all four of these, which again is not recommended, and thus why we're having this conversation today. And they would show up on an SOD report or show up as breaking an SOD violation to an auditor. So breaking these processes apart is the whole premise around segregation of duties. Go ahead, bro. All right, let's take a little bit of take a little deeper look into SOD as AOS has lined it out. So AOS has come up with a baseline best practice rules, SOD rules, I guess I should say. So a rule, and I'm only looking at this one right here because they have, last time I looked, 156 rules out there across the JDE system. So we're going to take a look at just one right here, and I'm going to show you what this matrix means over here on the left, and then what you're seeing here, the list 04A and list 04E. So taking into effect rule 04A and 04E, it deals with being able to enter a voucher and also maintain the vendor master. So essentially you can enter or create a new vendor and start entering vouchers towards that vendor which would inevitably or potentially get processed for payment. And if you're entering and you're maintaining the vendor, well, you probably have bank account access, or you at least have the address and some other pertinent information that you could make up and where the payment would be sent. So you see where I'm headed. There may need to be another step in here depending on how the structure is made, but from ALLOut standpoint and from a JDE Edwards standpoint, if you have these two capabilities in JDE, you are a potential risk towards the company. So again, rule 04A, 04E, it deals with voucher entry, vendor master maintenance. And if you look down here, the list 04A, in the system, a rule is made up of two lists, the 04A, the 04E for this particular one. 04A is the voucher entry, 04E is vendor master, and you can see the programs, and these are just screenshots of what's in AOS and in your system, or would be in your system, the programs that make up voucher entry. You see one thing here, or maybe you don't. These are not including custom programs. I did include just the base 560411, just because I know that's voucher entry, but there are other potential custom programs that a company could be using that would need to be added in here. We'll leave that off for now. That's not too pertinent. But as you can see, a rule again is made up of two lists, and the user must have access to both sides of the list. So for this instance here, let's say the user has on the fourth line of list 04A, P0411 full access. Segregation of duties, you cannot break a segregation of duty if you have inquiry access. You don't have ability to manipulate data in that program. You can only reach your hand in the cookie jar. You can't grab or mess around with any of the cookies per se. So again, our user has full access to P0411, and they have full access down the bottom to P04012. This user would be in violation of rule 04A, 04E. And this left grid over here, the matrix, what ALLOut designed. Look at the outer edge. I kind of cut it off on the screenshot right where it needed to be. You see the 04 voucher entry. You can go down, and it will tell you every time there's a number sign or a hash mark, that is where that list has a SOD violation or issue if the user has both of those lists or programs from both of those lists with the other list. So again, voucher entry out on the end, all the way down the bottom, list 04A vendor maintenance. You can connect the two when they meet. There is a hash there. That's just how you use their matrix. And as you can see, there's 04A has issues with multiple other lists. It's not just that list. So it is a robust matrix, but it's predefined for you, which is very nice. So go ahead, bro. All right, so here we're going to look at the output of, or I guess a sample of output from an SOD report in JD Edwards. So I ran it to Excel, and I picked an easy one. I picked JD Edwards here, which has sysadmin, which you see on the right side. So obviously it's probably going to be breaking every rule, or should be anyway. But for instance, I just kind of filtered on our rule 04A, 04E here, and this is how you read your SOD report and interpret it. Far left column is user. That should be just one user. You shouldn't have varying, users within the role itself, like I'm showing you here. Now, if you ran it over all users, all the users would be, together and lumped together. But you shouldn't have them mixed in like that. So to show you the column, or a third column, or column C, the embedded, you can see that the first, 10 or so are list 04A, and the last two are list 04E. So it breaks it out in the report for you. Two more columns over is the program column, which identifies the programs and or reports that cause the issue if the user has full access to them. And then finally, the last column over on the right will tell you which role. Now, because I chose this JDE user and they have sysadmin, it's only going to show one role. But if you have a true, what GSI would consider best practice role security model, you would see a role that grants the list 04A side, which let's just take, that's the voucher entry. So let's say it would be the voucher entry is the role. The last two would be, let's say, vendor maintenance or customer master, supplier master, whatever the role may be. So that would tell you, all right, this user has these two roles assigned, and that is what it's causing the violation of rule 04A, 04E. At that point, you have the option to remove one of those roles from the user, and that will take away this rule, or the violation for this rule. The user would no longer show up on an SOD report if you were to remove one of the roles. Again, in this instance, I used a user that has sysadmin, so obviously we can't take sysadmin away because they would have no access to the system. So if it was an issue that this user had sysadmin and was breaking this rule, there would need to be a more thought put into how we're going to solve this. But most of the time for sysadmin folks, if they have that assigned, it's accepted within the company. So yeah, that's how we analyze the SOD report, and we'll move on. Go ahead, bro. All right, so continuing with SOD, the last portion I want to talk about is with SOD is the category codes. This is a unique aspect that AOS has, and it allows to categorize your SOD reports. You can do that by, let's say the company has multiple divisions or multiple companies within it. It has a parent company, multiple children company. It can be set up that way. It can be set up departmentalized, AP, AR, warehouse, inventory. If those all have managers in those departments and they're responsible for their users' access and monitoring and updating and explaining why a user has certain access, then that might be the more formidable way to construct your SOD reports and your category codes. And then finally, we've seen it done through country, region, and even state. Just depends on, again, the structure of the business. But as you can see, I just provided a sample here, and again, using our JDE user down there. But this one, they wanted to call it IT sys, which is IT system users, so or services, I should say. Any user that would be or have a role that would fall under this particular category, then they would be assigned to this user category, and then would be allowed to run, you could run SOD reports over just that category versus either an individual user or all users in the system. Just a great aspect because running a full, depending on how many users you have, running a full SOD report can be hundreds of thousands of lines, if not more, depending on the system and how it's set up. So a nice aspect. Go ahead, Brooke. All right, so you're probably wondering, all right, well, you just mentioned we could run an SOD report, and depending on how our system's set up, we could have thousands and whatnot SOD violations. Well, there are things that, or I guess ways that can go around that. So some companies can't avoid it due to the size of their company, the way the company's set up, the way the company does business. So with that aspect, there's something that comes into play called mitigating controls. What are mitigating controls? Controls within AOS and JDE that notate a certain user is allowed the access despite the access presenting an SOD violation. So you run a report, you see that a user has the ability to, we'll go back to our old example, they have the ability to enter a voucher and create a vendor or edit a vendor. They're at risk. I mean, the company's at risk and they can do some harm. So, but that's the person that needs to do that. The company's not big enough. The size of the department's not big enough. The available resources to do these tasks is not there. So the company has to assume the risk at that point. Whether that user gets it from one role or multiple roles, the access is going to be there in JDE to perform those both of those tasks. So auditors will want to know, okay, well, this user has it, but do you know about it? And is it okay? That's where the mitigating control comes in. You say, yes, we understand that Kyle has the JDE profile and that he has sysadmin and that he is allowed to have this access. We assume the risk, and that's documented through a mitigating control in the system. We'll take a quick look here in a minute of kind of how to set that up. But it basically, you can apply it to the rule. I'm gonna back up. I'm not even gonna go there. That's gonna be coming up on one of our slides. So why do we want to use mitigating controls? Well, I just mentioned that, recognizes the user has a violation and the company is assuming the potential risk behind such access. There's situations you just can't avoid. And then how are they used? They're created in AOS. They cannot be created without AOS. They not regular JDE. Back to what I said earlier, they could be kept track of outside JDE, but it would be difficult and I'm not sure possible, but at least difficult to present to auditors or even in-house auditors via a report. So you can apply to the rule and the user in violation. And with AOS, you have the option, with this pretty neat. I don't know, I can't remember if I touched on this, but you have the option to print the mitigations on the report or not. So you can assume that if the mitigation is entered and the user's not showing up, then okay, then we've assumed the risk. And it also will cut down on your data that comes out on your reports, the size of them. So it is a nice feature, but majority of the time they want to see the mitigations too. They want to make sure that the mitigations are there and they want to know who has been mitigated. So, but a great tool and certainly one that is needed. Go ahead, Brooke. All right, so quick look at how to set up a mitigation in AOS. From the main AOS screen, which is PAOS 0001, if you have it, you'd access the access and audit reporting section. And under that, you'd see a maintain mitigations and then also an assign mitigation. So to create, you'll go to maintain. And as you can see here, I went ahead and created a couple just to show and show how to set up and what it looks like. So an AP pay, so if you had an AP person that can enter vouchers, maybe pay the vouchers, match the vouchers. If they had all that access, then and they needed it, and then you could set a mitigating control up for that and apply it to them. And then the one we've been talking about is our voucher entry and vendor maintenance. So I set up the AP vouch then, which would mitigate anyone that is supposed to have both of those capabilities in the system. So you set up the header there, and then you need to tie it to the rule and or the user next. So go ahead, Brooke. So this is going to show you how to tie it to the rule. In our instance over here in our labs, we had named some of our conflicts is CONF, A's, B's, and C's. So that's why you're seeing this versus a rule. You can name your rules, if you will, anything you'd like. You can use the ALLOut base rules, or you could rename those rules and just use what the methodology is behind them. But for this instance, you can see here I chose the rule which it deals with vouchers and vendor maintenance. You click on the little detail up in the top left up there because we want to go into this rule here and see how it's set up. And then on the screen over here on the right, you can see that there's two lists. Like I mentioned before, a rule has to be part of a list, or excuse me, a rule is made up of two lists, and you have to have both sides, or at least one program from both sides of that list to be in violation of that rule. So as you can see here, it's list 24 for this and list 31. You look in the description because that really doesn't mean a whole lot to us, is AP voucher and vendor master. So we are in the right one. You can just enter the list component. You change from a rule/list to a control. You can see in the category it's a mitigation. You choose your control and then you save it. And that's how you apply it to the rule. Go ahead, bro. All right, and then quick just to look at, I touched earlier on being able to print your mitigations on your reports or not. So once in the, again, the access and audit reporting section of AOS, one of the top left, I guess it is now, options is run reports, run access reports, if you will. So you've got I guess a big legend page or a header page where you fill in this data. This is just a clip of it on the top left of some of the values and some of the cells that need to be filled in, but the highlighted one is the mitigating controls. And then the lower one, lower screenshot just shows you what that one means. And it says, I want to print all access breaches and I want to print all mitigating controls. You have multiple options down here, as you can see, to change how you want it to print or if you want it to print at all. And then I just kind of included the user range there. That's my user ID. You can run it over a single user ID if you wanted. We'll show you a little bit more about that when we talk about access reporting here in a few minutes as well. Go ahead, bro. All right, so we've got a couple more or additional combat methods for GRC. So the first one is preventative SOD. It's a pretty cool one. But it's easy to run away with this and say, oh yeah, let's set all this up, and next thing you know, you go to assign a role and it can be an issue. So let me explain how that could be an issue, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But basically, preventative SOD allows you to set up rules that notify system admins / security officers, whoever's taking care of your role relationships, of certain role pairings be assigned to a user. They can either set that up to be a soft warning, which will allow the person to continue. It'll just give them a warning, are you sure you want to continue? Or it'll give them a hard stop saying, no, you need an additional level of authority or authorization, and it needs to be notated before this can go on. So some good features, but what does it mean? So basically you take a from role to a role, as you see on the screen here. If a user has this role assigned and they get this role assigned, so now meaning they have both of these roles, take the receipts for Brazil here and the credit orders on the right side. If they were to have one of those and then get one of the others to be, or the other one to be assigned, depending on how you have it set up, you would get the soft warning or the hard stop. Now, as you can see here, I showed a few, receipts. Deals with AR. It has a lot of, it potentially has a lot of issues around it. So they've matched that up with multiples of their other roles. So, credit debit orders, sure, you don't want to be editing receipts when you're crediting customers. Goes back to the vendor and the voucher. You can misappropriate goods or funds. So we would want to know about that. And this is a preventative step. You can't give someone this access without the system alerting you. So it's very unique and very, very nice. Why do we use it? Well, it's more effective SOD management because you're doing it in the forefront, just like I mentioned. And just like I mentioned again, realization is up front versus the reaction after the fact that either you fail an audit and they say, why does this user have this? They shouldn't have this. Or worst case scenario, the user commits the fraud and it's found out after the fact or years down. So it is a nice, just like it says, preventative step. Go ahead, Brooke. All right, the next additional method is access reporting. This is a good one here. There's plenty, and auditors seem to love this, but there are plenty of ways you can run this type of access report. It is easy to set up and run, and as I mentioned, typically with what auditors are requesting and how they're requesting it, I want to know who has access to this, or tell me everyone that can access these, this process. So it gives you multiple ways to present the data in a report form versus a manual form, which again can have some user manipulation to it. So that's why one of the main reasons auditors love this. So for this instance, we're going to say that the auditors wanted to know, does K-Gray, well actually I left both of those in there, does any user, so if I were to take out the user range Gray K1, Gray K1, and just have the program range of P00950 in there, and kick off the report, it would show me everyone in the system that can add, change, delete, because you can see the A up there, into program P00950, which is the security workbench. That would definitely be a highly censored and watched program, as you don't want too many of your users, or really any of your end users, logging in and being able to change security records. And then just on the adverse, if you were to take out P00950 of the program range and leave in user range, you can run an access report on everything that I have add, change, delete access to in the system. The cool thing about this report as well is it will show you what roles are granting the access. It's not going to say, oh, yep, he has access to P0092 or P0411. It's going to tell you where the user is getting the access from. So again, ease of management and monitoring in your access, more effective SOD management, and realization up front. If you've got these set up and you're running these types of reports, you've been told what your what your audit needs or your requirements or your internal audit or executive requirements are, then you can tailor this report or these access reports to meet those needs. And then you can put them on the scheduler, so you don't have to come in here and manually run them at all. Just takes a bit of pre-planning, again, knowing what is being asked and when, and then just set those up, and that's a great feature. That will be covered on one of our future advanced AOS, by the way, so look out for that one. Go ahead, Brooke. And lastly, and not all that AOS can handle, but unfortunately all the time we had for is the critical process list. So it kind of ties in. It's still an access report, but it's done over a list versus either a single program or a user. So still easy to set up. The screen down here should look pretty much the same. I've changed some of these, some of the grids that are in here. And up at the very top of the screenshot, you can see there's radials for segregation of duties. So that's the radio you click to run your SOD reports, critical process, which we're talking about now. And then the far left one, access report. I didn't have the room to show that on the last screenshot with everything else on there, but that's what is up on that screen as well. So you would just toggle to access report to change or to have that grid laid out. So when you switch the radio to critical process list, the list range down here is there versus the previous screen had a program. All right, so anyway, they have a sales list range set up, and I'm showing up in the top right-hand corner here that here are all the programs that they are considering are a part of their sales process and that they want to monitor. So they've created a list, called it sales. You can call it anything you'd like, create multiple lists if you like, and they've assigned these, I don't know, 10 to 12 programs that are critical to the process and to the business that they want to know and monitor who has access to, either at all times, periodic times, or whenever the auditors call. So again, critical process lists, great use of being able to streamline your reporting and your management in the system. Go ahead, Brooke. All right, and just to sum it up here, before we get to some questions, as I mentioned earlier, governance risk, GRC, it applies to everyone, mandated or not. Mandated being the public versus the privately held, different regulations and this and that. But all in all, in the grand scheme of things, we're wanting to protect our system and protect our company. So GRC, it applies to everyone, or should. AOS, it can get you started, or if you have it and aren't sure, it can enhance your current monitoring methods and meet the audit requirements. That tends to be a big one. And that's I hear the word audit, daily in what I do here, and they have a certain weight that they get to carry when they're checking your system or auditing your system. So knowing what they're looking for, being able to proactively provide what they're looking for and combat the issues that they're presenting or finding is a big step in your company being secure, and if you are subject to audits, passing those audits. Sit down and plan your risk management strategy. See where your gaps in access are. If you don't know, reach out. Reach out to us. Reach out to someone. I just hate to see what could be going on or what is going on behind the scenes that the company doesn't know about, but yet could be pretty easily identified with just a little bit of help. And then more importantly, use AOS to its potential. If you have it, that's great. Hopefully you're using it. If you don't know how to use it, it has way more potential than the things that I just mentioned here. This was just more of the high level, most pertinent, typically best practice used aspect of AOS related to GRC issues. So if you aren't sure, they have a very good guide out there that can show you how to do things. GSI, myself, and the security team here would be more than happy to walk through and show you how to use it, even maybe have some training sessions. So if you have it, or even if you don't have it, it's a fantastic tool that can make your IT team, security managers, even CNC folks just a bit happier and a bit more at ease. All right, Brooke, thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Kyle. That was great. Let me cover a few follow-up items before we move on to our question and answer section of our webcast. Our webcast today is part of our free ongoing educational webcast series on J.D. Edwards. And our upcoming webcasts are currently listed on the screen. And like I said earlier, to view our most up-to-date schedule, just visit the link down at the bottom of this page. All right, so we also have erptalk.com, which is a problem-solving forum where you can get your J.D. Edwards and other enterprise applications questions answered, as well as answer other people's questions. It's a problem-solving forum. And be sure to stay connected with us on social media. All of our handles are currently listed on the screen, and you can see our most up-to-date posts, and that includes our webcasts, our events, industry insights, and lots of good information. And we provide extensive free educational resources for the J.D. Edwards community, including our weekly educational webcasts, our monthly newsletter called the GSI Insider, our online resource center where you can access our on-demand webcasts, white papers, and other resources as well. And we also offer on-site and virtual workshops. If you'd like to sign up for our weekly email reminders for the upcoming webcasts, or our monthly newsletter, or to create an account to access our resource center, you can go to getgsi.com, go over on the main menu to resources and events, and then you can click on J.D. Edwards on the right-hand side. All right, Kyle, I see we have a couple of questions, but if you still would like to submit a question, you still have time to do so using the question panel in the GoToWebinar console window on the bottom right side of your screen. And if you did minimize your console, all you have to do is click the left arrow key to redisplay the questions panel. All right, Kyle, our first question is from Gail, and she said, if we secure some objects at the form level, do we have to specify the form in the list, or does specifying the program in the list suffice?
Great question. If you are using, I ran across this, and actually the company that was doing the manual mitigation outside, they were using the form W0011 for batches versus P0011. And I could not for the life of me figure out why the SOD report was not pulling up anyone with full access to that program that I know had full access to another a program that would cause an issue. Come to find out, they were using the form, and the form did need to be input into the list. So if you're using the form, you know, if they're accessing P0011 or P0411 on the menu, and that's the program, then that's all that needs to be in the list. But if it's a form, and that's the first time I had seen that, it would need to be in the details of that particular list. Yes. And
Okay, go ahead.
I think I haven't. Oh, sorry. I can see a few more here too. It might be easier for me to read them if you want. That's all right.
Sure. Thank you.
All righty. Let's see. From Dan. If my company were to purchase AOS, does the recommended rules and lists come with? I believe. Okay. So you're wanting to know, do the matrix that we talked about. Got it. No. So you can purchase the risk management and risk reporting modules, and that allows you to have the flexibility or capability to manage it using ALLOut. But the AOS created best practice rules and lists are a bit of a little additional purchase. Not sure how much. You certainly can inquire on that if that's something you're interested in. Let's see. Stephanie, say it recently failed or the findings from an audit report were negative. How long should I expect to implement GRC controls and resubmit to auditors? Let's see. Let me reread that real quick. Honestly, it depends on the makeup of the security. I've had if it needs a project, if it's not a couple of one-off fixes or quick fixes in the system, and it requires a kind of a security remediation project, it could take anywhere from, I'd say 5 weeks, because that's the shortest one we've ever done. 5 weeks anywhere to a couple months. It depends on the users. It depends on the size of the company, how you use JD Edwards, what modules you're using in JD Edwards. So it could be a fairly significant effort, but it also could not be. It just depends. And then more important to that, or more on to that, it goes to what model you're using. Job-based roles versus process-based. If you're already in a process-based model, you most likely will be able to adjust your model versus having to re-implement a model. Job-based, depending on how long ago it was and the convoluted access in those roles, could lead to a much bigger discussion for remedying the GRC issues. And we got time for one more, Brooke, because I think I see one more in here.
Yep, absolutely. Go for it.
All right. What is the typical method to rectify GRC issues without AOS? I think I might have touched a little on this. It's a manual effort for the most part. It would be fairly difficult. Again, depends on what you're facing. You would most likely to help it if you had a third-party app or tool set that ran reports such as DAS or Crystal Reports. There may be some things that you could tie into regular JDE that would collect the data needed and produce a report. I still think that's probably a bit more on the high level side and would probably pose a bit more of an issue trying to present that data. But that's certainly I would think a viable option. And lastly, depending on the UDOs and how it's set up, I believe you could probably use queries to at least monitor or alert, for certain access types. When a user gets assigned this, that, kind of the preventative SOD, or, there's a new user, depending on the query specifics, there's a new user access to P00950 or P00992. It alerts you in the query and you're able to go investigate it. Again, a bit more manual versus using AOS, but still could be effective. And I think that is all I can come up with methods without AOS. Certainly not trying to give you a sales pitch, but I can't stress how much AOS would certainly help. Yeah, so Brooke, it looks like that's all we have. I don't see any more questions.
One more question popped up from Jennifer, and Jennifer said, does AOS and JDE also offer an elevated account that can be temporarily assigned to a user and log the use of activity with that account when assigned?
Do you mind reading that one more time? I know that was long.
Yeah,
I just want to make sure I understand.
Yeah, does AOS and JDE also offer an elevated account that can be temporarily assigned to a user and log the use of the activity with that account when it's assigned?
The new version of AOS does have some updated and enhanced security history type tracking, whereas JDE just typically tracks a role change in a log in, log out scenario. And I'm not sure exactly what is meant by elevated, so I don't know if I can. I hope I'm answering it correctly, but basically it's only from an object usage tracking standpoint in 9.2, and it will basically log the activity done while in JDE only. AOS itself does not track what a user does in JDE. Like I said, it has some enhanced, security history, those sorts of mechanics in the new version, but it does not track history, like security history per se in JD Edwards.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Kyle.
Yeah, I just want to say one last thing, Brooke, if you don't mind.
Go ahead. Yeah, please.
This was more of a high level on some of this AOS stuff related to GRC. The security team has put together a pretty good list of webinars coming up in 2020. We're going to do a bit different and have it sectioned off into quarters. So it'll be a kind of a topic per quarter. Take for instance, I don't know if this will be Q1, but it'll be one of the topics is security best practices, and we'll have 3 separate runnings. So January, February, March, or April, May, June. Of that particular topic and some items around that topic. So this particular topic, AOS and GRC, will come up, and it may come up in a more advanced way. So be on the lookout. And always, if there are any questions whatsoever, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself or GSI or the security team. Thanks, Brooke.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kyle, and thank you everybody for your questions today. And as a follow-up from today's webcast, we ask that you complete a short 1-minute survey when you exit, and you will be receiving an email with a link to our resource center on our website where you can access the recording from today's webcast, as well as a copy of the presentation. And after today's webcast, we will do the drawing for the $25 Amazon gift card, and anybody that attended the entire webcast will be eligible. And if you have any follow-up questions, like Kyle said, you can contact Kyle or myself, and we will make sure we get back to you. And our contact info is currently listed on the screen. We thank you again, everybody, for attending, and Kyle for your presentation. And we hope that you have a great day.
Thanks, Brooke. Thanks, everyone.
Oh, we got a comment from Sherry saying, nice presentation. Thank you. Thank you, Sherry.
Thanks, Sherry.
Okay, bye, guys.